everybody, DeathsStalker here. So I thought I'd talk about MotoGP since we just had the first race of the season, and I'll talk about what happened, what didn't happen, and what's going to be going on this season. And I thought, well, I'd talk about it since it's still kind of winter outside. I thought I'd change the oil on my bike. So the first thing I might as well talk about is the fact about the MotoGP race was there wasn't one. And if you are, if you've been paying attention, you know that of course in the world we have the coronavirus, or whatever the bunch of letters and numbers they created for it to give it a specific name. So that of course meant that they didn't have enough teams to have a MotoGP race, so Dorna decided to cancel that particular race because it wasn't able to reschedule, because in a few short weeks that whole track is undergoing resurfacing. So it's going to be, by the time it's done, it'll be the summer, which means that the track will be too hot to have motorcycles, and it just wasn't going to happen. And then what happened was Thailand also has restricted access to their country for people from other places, and so they had to reschedule the race in Thailand to, I believe, early October, and that's as of right now. This stuff might change because the next race in the schedule is Austin, Texas, at Circuit of Americas, and the city of Austin has declared a local emergency as well for the coronavirus. So we don't know when the next race is going to be. But surprisingly, the motorcycles, the actual Grand Prix bikes, the MotoGP bikes, were actually in Qatar, but they didn't have enough teams and whatnot. So they had a few people there. HRC actually, after the test, had kept their mechanics there, so that instead of flying them back to Japan and then flying them back again, so that they actually had their Japanese technicians, which are, the engine people, the guys who rebuild the seamless transmissions, etc. So they were in not a bad situation, but the fact that, like Valentino Rossi can't come because he's in the area that's been shut down, along with Ducati and a bunch of other places. So it's, as far as organizing a race, it's a mess. Unfortunately, it's something that has to be done because of the seriousness of what's going on. But it's going to make 2020 a very memorable season for racing if we do get them. So we're not really certain what kind of racing seasons we're going to have this year, because everything's sort of in a flux. So if they manage to get the coronavirus under control, we might be able to have a pretty good season. But if things spiral out of control, all bets are off. Now on the bright side, we had a Moto2 and a Moto3 race at Qatar, because those riders were already there with their teams. And I haven't caught the Moto3 race yet. I came down to do an oil change and do another video, and I'm going to watch the Moto3 race when I go back. And Joe Roberts, who's an American, managed to get the pole in the Moto2 race, and did a really good job. He's never finished better than 14th in his previous couple seasons in Moto2, and it's nice to see him actually able to do that well. So if anybody's asking why I don't have the other fairing off, is I actually had someone who was asking me if I can do an oil change without taking all the bodywork off. And I didn't know, so I thought I'd give it a try. And the answer technically is no, because the oil filler cap is on the other side of the bike, so that fairing has to come off to put the oil back in. Okay, so back to MotoGP. Now, there wasn't a MotoGP race, but there was the preseason testing that took place in Malaysia and also in Qatar. And the testing seemed to be working okay for most manufacturers in the first test in Malaysia, but when they moved to Qatar, Honda seemed to be having some real problems, and I'll touch on that in a second. In both areas, Yamaha looked very strong. All three Yamaha factory riders. Fabio Quartararo, by the way, now has an actual factory 2020 Yamaha for this season. They were topping the leaderboard. They were always near the top. They all seemed very happy and pleased with what was going on. So they looked very strong. So Ducati had a new technical device on their bike that was the talk of the paddock, and it seemed to make their bikes a little bit faster. Dovi himself was complaining that the bike still does not steer well, so it might not be perfect, but I think everyone knows that Ducati, you don't really know what they have until the first race. So they look good. Whether or not they are, it's going to be hard to tell. Suzuki found some horsepower. Both Suzuki riders were actually up near the top as well, and they all seemed fairly happy. The Aprilia riders were ecstatic because their new and improved Aprilia actually was new and improved, and it looked to be very good. It'll be difficult to see how they do until we actually get to a full race, but the riders definitely were very happy with what they got. KTM, they had a new bike as well, a new chassis, and the bike seems to be a lot better. They seem to be pretty pleased with what was going on, so again, they look pretty good. Now let's talk about Honda. The 2020 Honda is supposedly an improvement on the 2019 bike. They have a slightly different aero package and a few other things, but it does have the Honda horsepower. And the front end feeling that they had with the 2019 bike appears to be worse with the 2020. Even Marc Marquez was starting to complain that they're not having any feeling from the front end, and he actually had several crashes. One of them, he broke the motorcycle very, very badly. Cal Crutchlow again was complaining about it. Alex Marquez, I don't think, was riding it very much because he was still learning how to ride a MotoGP bike coming up from Moto2. It was looking very, very bad for Honda. Then on the last day of testing, they brought out a 2018 bits and pieces. They brought a 2019 bike from the LCR team, and they were mixing and matching parts, and somewhere along the lines they think they know where they've gone wrong, and they seem to be a lot happier. So I suspect they've been chasing a problem for the last couple test days, and at least they've done something which points them to where they think they're wrong. So it's hard to say what's going to happen. Now, as it stands again right now, the next race that they should be racing is in Austin. Again, that sort of depends on what's going on. The world is changing. This doesn't just affect MotoGP. Formula One's had a race canceled. Tennis tournaments have been canceled. Football leagues, or soccer as we call them here, are playing with empty stadiums because they don't want fans collecting because of the danger of the virus. It's not just affecting motorsports. It's basically all sports. The South by Southwest Music Festival in Austin, Texas has been canceled. So this is something serious. So, all I can say about the virus part of things is pay more attention to the actual health organizations and the news, because the news is there to sell advertising, and a lot of the hysteria that we've seen in the past from various news channels is not a good thing. What I would recommend is, going to your local national health, Society of the Center for Disease Control in the U.S., Health Canada, of course, in Canada, and of course Australia, England, France, all the countries have their actual health center. That's who you should really be listening to, because the actual real information is going to be there. Now, back to the oil change. I'm pretty certain anyone's seen an oil change on an RC51. I actually have a dedicated video. I'll put the link in the bottom, so if you actually want to see the full oil change, it's tighten everything up, torque it to the correct specs, fill the oil to the correct specs, run the engine for 2 to 3 minutes to let the oil settle, check for leaks. Everything looks good. We're back in business. I've still got more work to do on the bike, so it's not going to be buttoned up for another couple of weeks, because I got some more work to do, which there will be actual dedicated videos on. So fingers crossed we'll get a MotoGP season, and fingers crossed they'll they'll have a way of dealing with this this virus thing. So anyways, I hope I informed you a little bit, kept you a little entertained, and you know, see you next video. DeathsStalker signing off.